down to Sydney to present to your group. And thank you very much for putting us up in your home. We really appreciate that. You're very generous for doing that. So, yes, there are so many mysteries around the UFO phenomenon. And the deeper you dig, as you all know, the more mysterious it becomes. When I got actively involved with UFO Research Queensland in 1988, I thought the UFO phenomenon was much more simpler than what it appears to be now. I thought it was extraterrestrials in spaceships, either coming from other planets to visit Earth, or they were space dwellers living in spaceships out there, maybe deep space travellers, excuse me. But over the years it's just become far more complex. The many stories that I've heard from the public, which now is, I've stopped counting, but it's somewhere between 3,000 to 3,500 stories over the years. So I'm going to present some of those here to you today while we explore the deeper mysteries of the subject. So, and what I want to start off with is extraterrestrials, UFOs, non-human intelligences, or all of the above, time travellers, space dwellers, you know, interdimensionals. The list just gets more and more endless as the years go by. But the thing is, they know things about us. They know things about us, about who we are, where we go, where we live, what we do. And I'm saying that from my years of experience of talking to witnesses. Now, this case that I want to talk to you about, which demonstrates that, oops, I've lost my slide. Oops, here we go. Is one that occurred to a lady in 1992, Rita Hayden. She's gone public with her experience years ago, and she actually became the president of the Ipswich UFO Society. Ipswich is about a town half an hour west of Brisbane. And at the time, Rita was working for RACQ, which is like your NRMA, and I think she was in the call centre, and it was 2 in the morning and she was driving home. And as she approached Ipswich, she was following another car, and she saw a light up in the sky. It got closer, it seemed to zero in, and before she knew it, it was pacing her car as she was driving along. It was a little bit bigger than her car. That's her sketch, with a light at the back, which is about 2 feet across. And she said it was silver, sleek, no seams, no rivets, nothing like that. And she could have put her hand out the window and touched it while she was driving along. Of course she didn't. But soon she came to a railway crossing, and there was a car already pulled up at the crossing because the boom gate had come down or the red light had come on, I can't remember now. And the object slowed with her, but then it took off and it left. And she saw it disappear off into the distance. And she thought, well, that was really weird, and continued to drive home. As she did, though, when she got closer to her own home and she got to coming down her street, she saw that what she thought was the same object was hovering over her neighbour's garage. And it was almost like it had left enough, given her enough personal space, if I could say it that way, to be able to summon up the courage to drive into her own property, which she did after a little while. And she raced from her car, grabbed the keys, fiddled at the door, got inside. If I just go back there, now hang on, which is the one for the pointer, Paul? Is it the top one?
Yes.
Top one, oh great. Maybe not. Is it? Oh, there it is, yes. So she had to drive down here and then get out of the car and come in this door here. Anyway, so she did that. She came into the house, she got onto the phone, rang us. My late husband answered the phone, and he was on the phone with her for about an hour while she was giving him a blow-by-blow description of what was going on. So when she got into the house, the object had moved from over the neighbour's garage into her backyard. And it hovered there, and she said it lit up the place like daylight, which is a very, very common feature in UFO reports. And she's looking at it through the Venetian blinds, continues to do that for an hour, talking to Martin. Then it lifts up and then it goes away. The next day she goes out the backyard. A foot of water had disappeared from her pool. A large mango tree that she had died off had to be cut down. And the little dog, the neighbour's dog that was barking at this object above her house, above her yard, over the next month it lost its hair and it died. So that was a very good case because of those effects. But the point was that object knew where she lived, or it had an idea of the vicinity of where she lived. A little bit creepy, I know, but it just is a good case to demonstrate that they know things about us. I knew Rita. Rita's still alive, but she's quite elderly now, and she's never changed the story. She had a military background, and she never tried to read anything into it. She just told her story. The other strange thing about UFOs and extraterrestrial craft, I guess, and whatever else you want to call them, is they move through solid matter. And this is a case that occurred in 1996 outside the twin towns RSL and Tweed City on the Gold Coast. And there are two gentlemen standing outside having a cigarette in the evening, and they saw this object come down over the water. And it's a pretty good sketch, and because it happens to be this gentleman was an artist. So after his experience, he went home and he sketched what he saw with great detail, and he also painted it later as well, and did a few different sketches. And he described it as being large at least as a football field, and it had facets on it, and as the light, even though it was black as black, as the light shone down onto the surface, it was silvery. There's a bit more to it, but basically they watched it. It had a surface that was marbly like it was liquid marble, and it would change while they were watching it. But in the end of the sighting, what happened was the object took off, and it took off through high-rise buildings. And his exact words were, it cut through them like butter. So here's a good example of something that is a UFO that actually went through solid matter. And here's another sketch of what he saw. And he talks about it as black, yet shone bright silver in its massive facets. So that was a very good case. I didn't actually investigate that one. I sent it down to our rep down on the Gold Coast, and he looked into it. To give you an idea of the size, he sketched the size of the object in that particular photograph on the Gold Coast newspaper, just to give us a correlation, I guess. The other experience that could demonstrate this too, but in this case the witness thinks he walked through solid matter. And this occurred in Yowa in Western Queensland in 1988, involved a senior policeman in the Queensland Police Force. I believe Bill Chalker actually interviewed his brother, because the two men were together, and they had an opal mine out at Yowa, and because he was in Brisbane and his brother was in Canberra, they would meet at the opal mine and they'd spend time together doing what they liked to do. And one night, because I was staying in a camping ground, I think I was staying in a hut from memory, the Brisbane witness, shall we say, witness A, went to go to the restroom, so they had to go to external facilities, and his brother said, I'll come too. They both went. His brother went into the men's room first, and while the witness that is standing outside waiting for his brother saw this shadow come over, and the moonlight was blocked out, and he looks up and he sees this large craft, and out of it comes all these smaller craft. And you can see, have I got it there? No, it's 230 metres across in diameter, he estimates. So we're not talking about something that we're going to sneeze at here. But the as with these stories, as you start to investigate them, they become more complex and intricate. And he had missing time, he had abduction experiences, but he also had this other strange experience where he'd gone into police headquarters, finished his job, feeling very happy and relaxed, and he comes out to where he parked his motorcycle. He couldn't, earlier in the day, he couldn't see it. He just saw two other motorcycles. He goes, oh, that's a bit strange, maybe someone's playing a trick on me. He walks down to the next level, which is a spiral, didn't see any motorcycles there. Gets in the lift, goes back up to the level above him, which didn't take long at all, comes out, looks for his motorcycle there, not there. Gets back in the lift, comes down, comes out, and not only is his motorcycle back there, but there's 8 or so motorcycles lined up beside it in a long line. Now he said there's no way in the world that all those motorcycles could have come into that parking area because it was quite open, even though he was spending time, just a little bit of time going up in the lift, that I wouldn't have heard it, because as soon as they enter the car parking facility, you hear those motorcycles resounding like that. And not just one, but 8 or 9 of them now. But his turned up out of the blue. And when he came out, he was walking through where he had walked only a minute before, and he realised that where he had walked before was where the motorcycles now were. And he believes that when he first found his motorcycle missing, that he actually walked through that string of motorcycles. He could have gotten confused. Barry and I were talking about this case recently, going back through the notes. And it's quite possible, but he doesn't think he did. He thinks that's what happened. But another interesting case, which sort of backs up his theory, was a close encounter case, which I did investigate. And the witness told me of one particular experience where he was in his house, heard his name called, and the next thing he knows, he's been taken through the walls of his house, out to the outside grounds of his house. As he's going through the walls, he can see the grains of timber, comes outside, goes, what the heck is going on? And then he's taken back in through the wall of the house, and he can see the grain of wood again. And these are some of the unusual, mysterious sort of things that also go on in the background of close encounters. I think you'd agree, Mariana. Another case that occurred recently that I heard about, the woman contacted me, and I know we all know about electrical interference with vehicles with close encounters. Radios going static, the power in the car just completely disappearing, and often the car will just keep on, run out of power and just roll off to the side of the road, and people think, what's going on? Next thing, a UFO turns up above the car, to the side of the car. Inside the vehicle is lit up like day once again. The object disappears, and then all the electrical disturbances disappear and the car starts again. But this one went a little bit further. And this case involved a woman who was at the time was 17, and it happened at Cunnamulla in Queensland, and 1988. And she was driving a 1974 Ford Fairlane V8 on the road from Cunnamulla to Burke. And as she was driving along, and this is her sketch, I hope you can see it, oh yes, she was seeing this object outside. Down beside her car, half a metre from the car, she too said, I could have reached out the car and touched it. But it didn't seem to be quite solid. It was a diagonal light, and as she was travelling, it would change from being elongated to tall and thin, and she described it as elongating to the size of a telephone pole or a power pole as she's driving. The other thing that happened was while she's driving, and this is her depiction of it outside the window, she could see these bright, pretty, soft blue pea-sized lights buzzing around her limbs and her torso, and she was looking in the rear-view mirror so she could see they were around her head as well. And what was happening as she was driving was that this diamond-shaped object would elongate and then narrow out, elongate and narrow out like it was pulsing. These little pea-sized lights were around her body. The lights from an oncoming vehicle would appear, and it would all disappear. In the rear view mirror, she'd see the lights of the car that had gone past her disappeared, and this would all start again. So the elongating light and the blue, small blue lights coming around the body. It happened 3 times, and she doesn't know why. But what happened to her after that was, the strange thing, I guess, was that her car would start by itself, but she wasn't in it. So she would be inside her house with the keys in a pocket, and the car would start and it would take off by itself. Now, I'd not heard of this before. No. On another occasion, she was parked, she pulled into a garage to fill up with petrol, and then the attendant was still coming out filling up the car with petrol, and she was inside buying something else, and he's standing there with the Bowser and the car just drives off. So I don't really know if she had to pay for the extra petrol because it never went in the car. But the point is, it happened so often and it was witnessed by so many people, she actually became the laughing stock of Cunnamulla. And you know what country people can be like. They'll take the mickey out of everything without actually thinking, well, why is this happening? How is that happening? How is it possible? But the car would go down the street and they'd say, oh, witness A's car's going down the road, ha, 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 but not actually stopping to ask the question. So she said she became very, very embarrassed by that experience. I have not heard of that before. But again, this is some of the mysteries around these sorts of cases. The other, there are various theories as to why that can happen. I don't really know why, but one could be that she said that night when she went home, went to bed, she said, I was climbing the walls. I couldn't sleep. There was this energy inside of me and it was making me climb the walls. And I did wonder that if that close proximity of that object somehow affected her own electrical circuit, which we all have, to a degree that it was then she was affecting other electrical circuits because she had been in that car at the time. I really don't know, but I like to throw these ideas around.
Cars are beautiful, just like our body.
Yeah, could be. Now, the other strange thing I wanted to talk about a little bit more in depth is this strange script writing that people report, which comes up in some close encounter cases. And this is from a woman in Queensland who has seen these types of beings, these types of mantis-type beings, and started to spontaneously draw this script. And it's like a doodle really, but it's, people talk about it as scripts. And here's some more examples. The one on the left is hers, the other one isn't. And people, for some reason, they seem to report that they get these downloads of information. It's not always like this. Sometimes it's equations. But this is the more common thing. And I'm not saying this is an alien language by any means, and I would never say that because, one, we don't have alien script writing to compare it to, and two, we wouldn't even recognise alien writing if we fell over it. But it is alien to us, and I guess that's why that's sort of stuck. The other thing that people report is they will just get one symbol and they'll repeat it over and over and over and over and over and over. They become hypergraphic with it. And this one looks quite like a crop formation, doesn't it? More examples. There is a Facebook page called Symbols and Star Writing. So if any of you are having this experience, you can get onto there and share your experiences. But you all know about, I'm sure, most of you would know about Tracy Taylor's story. She'd had close encounters, and I think Mary Rodwell was the person who actually spoke about her case the first time, I think. And of course, Tracy did this strange, she did this geometrical artwork, which she's got here, but also this script writing as well. I've got a bigger piece of it there. So it's, I don't know why people who report close encounters, and I'm not talking about everybody, I'm talking about a percentage, but why they do this. Common to the point where I can go around to a Mind Body Spirit festival, look at some of the artwork by people there, look for glyphs in the artwork that comes up somewhere. I go and talk to them, tell them I'm a UFO researcher. Would you mind telling me why you do these glyphs in your artwork? And they will always tell me, well, actually I had close encounters. So for some reason it comes up. I don't understand it. I'm not sure why, but it does. But then when you go to this book by William Steinman, UFO Crash at Aztec, occurred in 1948, a book with parchment-like pages with symbols written on it was found at the crash site, or so the author claimed, possibly meaning it was extraterrestrial. Here's another example of that. What does it mean? I don't know. Is that alien language? I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm just showing you what's around. And of course we have George Adamski. Sorry, someone was writing down that book title. Did you get it? Sorry. George Adamski's case, where he was given one of his, and I'm not saying George Adamski was a real case, but most of you would know about George Adamski, the early contactee. Some people don't. And he was given a photographic plate that was returned to him by extraterrestrials from their craft, and it had this scripty sort of scribble on it as well. Interesting. Also, some of these showed up on the footprint of the extraterrestrial that George Adamski claimed to have met in the desert in 1952. That was Orthon, he called him. But we also have this writing here, this sort of scripty stuff that showed up was done by Betty Hill in 1967, and she was shown that in a book that she was shown on the craft. We also have the Roswell symbols. And symbols, I think symbols are probably a universal thing probably throughout our galaxy, our universe, because they're easy, they're basic, but they contain a lot of meaning relevant to that culture or to that species, really. So these were the symbols that showed up on, that Jesse Marcel took some of the fragments from the Roswell crash home to show his family, and particularly his son, and he wrote about that as well. But then we have Betty Andreasen, who was shown this sort of alien script during her close encounter, and this was on board a craft. And Betty Andreasen, you might know her as Betty Andreasen Luca. She had many experiences starting at about age 13, where she was taken on board a craft, had out-of-body experiences, taken on board physically and out-of-body, and which also involved her family and her daughter. And I just read recently that her daughter Becky died of cancer last week, which was very sad. She put it on a Facebook page. But this also comes up here. So what does it mean? Again, I don't know. But it's one of the mysteries that surround this phenomenon. Now I want to take a left turn here, because when I was sort of trying to understand these things about scripts, I came across, this is a while ago, I came across the tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of termas. And termas are hidden objects and scripts that are buried basically for the benefit of future generations. But they can be objects that are buried in the ground, but they can be symbols and information buried in human beings' minds. And I found that very interesting, because in the Tibet, as you know, the Buddhists believe in reincarnation. So they can put information into the minds of people for later in their life or in later lives, for that information, when that individual is ready, for it to be made available to that person at that time. And somehow that will be triggered in them. Don't ask me how. But they understood that. And that's a tradition that's been around for a very, very long time. So we've got a bit of catch up to do there. And these are some of the symbols that are used, or have been used in various cultures along that line as well. And there's a book here which talks about the hidden teachings of Tibet and the Terma tradition, if you wanted to follow that up. But while I was looking at this, I thought, well, that's very interesting, because I've heard reports of people saying that information has been put into my mind, I can't access it through regressive hypnosis. It's like there's a block there. I'm not meant to know about it or understand it yet. Okay, and I'm sure you've come up with that too, Mariana. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. What does that mean? But then I thought about other ways that that's happened in our own culture. And it's happened through yantras. And when I looked into those a bit more, it talked about yantras organising our physiology so that psychological processes of a certain nature can be evoked more easily, so that we can change the way that we think, go outside the boundaries of our limited knowledge. And a bit like a koan, I guess, a Zen koan, but it takes it out of ourselves without us actually looking to do that. It will switch on at a various time. So we can look at yantras, and that's what they do. They prepare us for change. But when you look at the yantra on the Nazca Plains, and I'm sure some of you have been watching Ancient Aliens and you've seen this image many times in that series, I know that David Hatcher-Childress and Giorgio Tsoukalos talk about, they fly over the Nazca Plains and look at the various depictions, and they say, well, yes, those are put there, were they put there by extraterrestrials? They're certainly put there to be seen from the sky. And I agree with that, definitely to be seen from the sky. But this is old. This is an old yantra, and perhaps it was dug out or carved out of the plains there for future generations, which we can now see from the sky. It may not be extraterrestrial at all. It may be from previous generations recognising that if we could see this from the sky, we're going to be taken out of our previous way of thinking to try to understand it. We'll have to grow outside the bounds of our current knowledge to be able to ask the questions, what is it? What's it there for? Where did it come from? All those questions. But there are other things like that show up, and they're in crop formations. And of course we all wonder, well, what are crop formations? What are they? People say they're extraterrestrial, they're perhaps from mind at large, perhaps some of them are done by the military, who knows? But if some of those are from a greater intelligence, and it can be alien, but not alien that we understand, but maybe alien that we are yet to understand, perhaps some of these are showing up to take us out of our limited way of thinking. And I know when I first saw my first images of crop circles, I think it was about 1990, just before we brought Colin Andrews out here, from the minute I saw them, I was captivated with them. One, because they were so unusual, I'd not seen them before. But two, I think because images appeal to our subconscious mind. And something inside me got triggered when I saw my first crop formations. And it stayed there, and I've maintained a deep interest in them for many, many years, and I can't tell you why. It just happens. So here's some more, doing the same thing. And I don't know, has anyone here been in a crop formation? You have? Did it have an effect on you?
Yes. My feet buzzed for about 2 weeks.
Ah. Yep. And I know they've captivated Megan Hazelwood immensely. That's all she feels like she wants to talk about. So that's again another mystery. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if extraterrestrials, if they understood that whole, what the Tibetans call the Terma tradition, but what if they understood that faculty in the human mind to be able to implant information that would arise later in our lives? And if you believe in reincarnation, perhaps later in our future lives, or if you're looking at the scientific field of epigenetics, maybe it'll be handed down the family line. And that's a high possibility, I think. But let's look at alien languages too. Which you can see down the bottom of that, it's got glossolalia here. And that's exactly what it is. Glossolalia is something that doesn't seem to have the rigorous components of a language, but yet it comes out of people at certain times. You can go to the Pentecostal churches. I'm sure some of you have been there. You've heard of people doing glossolalia there, speaking in tongues. I've had people pray over me, speaking in tongues at various times. It's not unfamiliar to the human condition. In fact, it seems to be quite normal under certain circumstances for us to speak in tongues. It's recorded in the Bible. And there was a woman, Dr. Felicitas Goodman, who was an anthropologist. She's no longer with us. She wrote a great book about speaking in tongues, if you're interested. She actually lived amongst the Mesoamericans and various tribal groups, shall we say, for 20 years. And she studied glossolalia. But she did find that it often happens, or erupts, can we say, in community, not as individuals. And yet in people who report close encounters, when they do this strange language or speaking, they do it in an isolated environment. So that's the difference between where you'd see it in a church as opposed to people who have close encounters. But somehow that's been triggered in people who have those experiences. Now, this is a clip of a woman, Janet Mayer. I contacted her in 2010. She had this clip on YouTube, which I'll play for you. And we started communicating. But I'll tell you about that. Use this one? This one? Oh, you do it. I'll tell you about it after you listen to this.
Hello, my name is Janet Mayer. Hello, my name is Janet Mayer. It is September 5th, 2010. Nonosam me itera katsora porimana. Nimi iseria tolagan, dormisipal, lorosare, monomakala, dorosariamakal, uriasepelan. Morosari pamalaria seriano, corosariala, dormahiana. Nimi etera katsaroret basara, monowikalia, dorosepemasera. Nina makalo, isandaba. Dormehela, dorosaria, doromakalasi. Sido meletara, dorosapalanoma. Isebebelora, monokbesi. Mosepela, doromiehetera kasanimietra katalora. Borome eteresana. Nomi eterokopala, momana atakelia seri miholo, momana karasari pola sariana mahana, gorosare, moriapalan, dorabasun. Mina maole arasora de la moya kanaksedel, idotapala enonsaka, orama ayanamel, dorvisile kanana, borepes idal, dorama oigala sariano mehera. Monoia atergolana, dormi etedobala de amoyone kesapilo tarakasani mehel. Dormanania karatsara, dormalaya tarakopalanimo, orama sipilenema, boromana etarakana. Minona kalasato inamo, isimna kariaso, ere, oro, aman, aki, oro, asa, alorima, adaba ena kalon in masari pehelo. Mane ikalasata teke, ola, omakiana, barasaro hulia. Minata, dorakapasarabe, iraposoro bahia polo, demeina, drama, isana. Thank you. If you know what language I am speaking, please let me know at janetmayer.net.
She's a lovely lady. And we've had many Facebook chats about that. But it turns out, after a 4-year search for Janet, she finally discovered what that was. And it started spontaneously while she was attending a holotropic breathwork session. And she started speaking this unknown language. 4 years later, they were identified by Dr. Bernardo Piexotto from the Smithsonian Institute, who's no longer with us now, that she was speaking Brazilian rainforest language. Isn't that interesting? It's alien to her, but not extraterrestrial for us, which got me started to thinking along a whole other line, which was, well, why is she doing that for a start? How does that happen? The language is extremely obscure. Very, very few, like 2 people in the whole world knew what that language was, and he was one of them. How does that happen? I don't know. I wish I had that answer. I really don't know. But I started to think, well, the things that we've heard of people who are starting to speak spontaneous languages, who've had close encounters, It may be triggered by their close encounter. We need to record what they're speaking, take it to linguists and say, please, can you tell us what it is? Does it have any sort of language components to it that you could recognise? Or is it just glossolalia? I think it's the time that we actually started to research the background of these things and try and understand it a bit more deeply. But again, it's one of these strange mysteries that surrounds the UFO phenomenon.
Was what she was saying, was it meaningful?
Yes, thank you. It turned out to be that she was speaking their prayers and words from their songs. I don't know why. You may be or may not be surprised to learn that Betty Andreasson also did the same thing. Who's read The Watchers, by the way, by Raymond Fowler? Okay. Well, it's a book you need to read. It's a good book. He's written another one which is about the connections between close encounters and near-death experiences, which is pretty much where I'm at right now. But in the very early sessions of hypnosis with Betty, after she'd been taken on the craft, and so she could try and remember more about her experiences, she started to speak a strange language too. And these words went untranslated until researcher Leonard Keane identified that she was speaking Gaelic. Now that remained unidentified, I think I was reading for about 10 years. They just sort of went, oh, that's odd, and put it aside, didn't know what to do with it. But I, having an interest in this, I was reading that, I think it was in the foreword of one of the books, but it certainly shows up in Whitley Strieber's Transformation. He talks about it. And it was translated to say, children of the northern peoples, you wander in impenetrable darkness, your mother mourns, a dark occasion forebodes when weakness in high places will revive a high cost of living, an interval of mistakes in high places and interval fit for distressing events. That's what it translated to. Which brings me back to the Terma tradition, because Raymond Fowler, who was the chief investigator of Betty's case, and I think there were 7 investigators, there was a physics scientist, a psychologist, Raymond Fowler was a UFO researcher, there was a hypnotherapist, and various other people with different backgrounds involved in her case, which I didn't really realise until I started looking into this more, and I'd known about the case for years. But Ray Fowler says, during the phase 1 and 2 investigations of this classic abduction case, the alien entities reportedly began to release segments of a message to mankind. Heretofore, much of their so-called message had been purposely locked up within hidden recesses of Betty's mind. Other abductees also had some aspects of their message hidden in their minds. The aliens allegedly have programmed it to be released over a period of time, like the contents of a time-release medical capsule. And to me, that really sounded like something akin to the Tibetan Buddhist Terma tradition. They had an understanding of how that worked in the human psyche, and were utilising it. I'll just leave it there because, it's something further to look into. The other thing I realised when I became involved in, actively involved as an investigator in '88, what I didn't sort of pay attention to then, but I did some years later, was that half the people, when I said to them, have any other strange things happened to you? They'd say, well, yeah, but it's not really related to aliens. I had a near-death experience. And I can tell you that was quite a high figure. And because I had been studying the near-death field for 10 years before I got into the UFO subject, I was aware of near-death experiences. So I was primed, I guess, to know what they were talking about. But I wasn't putting that into their mind. I was just saying, so what else has happened to you? And they'd tell me, well, I've died. I died twice, I died 3 times, and this is what happened while I was out of my body, and blah, blah, blah. So it's not surprising that a high percentage of those who report close encounters also report having had 1 or more near-death experiences, seeing ghosts, angelic visitations, poltergeist activity, out-of-body experiences, and contact with deceased relatives and more. That is a subject of its own. I wish I had more time to talk about that, but I will be talking about it at Paracon, at just that particular topic, in, the 26th to the 29th of May, which is the Katoomba in the Blue Mountains at the Carrington Hotel. I just thought I'd put that in there so that you are aware of that. And there's also going to be an ET and spirit contact panel that Barry and I and Mariana are a part of too. But of all those other experiences that people report, they also report channeling. People who report close encounters will channel. And I've actually got a lady who's had some sort of strange encounters and has started to channel, speaking at my afterlife group this month. But recently I was on the IONS website and I watched a presentation done by a researcher, and she had found, her preliminary findings were that she'd found that out of 1,000 meditators, 60% of them had had some sort of non-physical entity contact, and 56% of them had shown clairvoyance or telepathy abilities. And I'm just putting that in there just to say that these things are not uncommon for human beings to do. They seem to be quite natural for us to do. These are other faculties that some of us have not switched on. But if you go to Ken Ring's book, The Omega Project, Near-Death Experiences, UFO Encounters and Mind at Large, this is what changed it all for me. His book came out in the 80s, and I actually had Ken stay with me back in about 95, I think it was, for a few days, talking about near-death experiences in the blind. But he was probably the first one in the literature that I came across, and there's not a lot of people talking about it, about the connection between people who have near-death experiences and people who report close encounters. And he was a psychologist who was studying the types of people who are reporting these things. And he found a lot of commonalities between them. Often had a difficult childhood, perhaps even traumatic childhood, high level of abuse in childhood, whether it was physical, emotional or mental abuse. But I find that too, that they've had quite a difficult traumatic childhood. People who report close encounters. So it's a good book to read if you can find it. Now the other thing that sort of ties in with that is Michelle DeMarquet's book, Abduction to the Ninth Planet, which I think has been republished under Prophecy of Theubia these days, I think. I don't know if Michelle is still alive. He was a Frenchman living in Queensland, up near Cairns. He came and stayed with my husband and I for 10 days in '94. He spoke about when he was taken to this other planet, that on that planet there were these large buildings shaped like that called dokos. And this is one in particular that he was taken to with Tao was the lady who took him, who happened to be a very tall, blonde, like a tall white extraterrestrial, if you could call it. But in his book he talks about this doko being half immersed in water, 560 metres across. It was a huge building, or whatever it was, and this is Michelle and the woman he was with there, so it gives you ideas of the comparative size. And he talks about in there being shown by this extraterrestrial in the body of Jesus Christ in suspended animation, and other beings who had played significant roles in various different places in the universe, and they had stored their bodies in this suspended animation. But guess what? Betty Andreasen had seen this too on a craft that she had been in. And she says here, this is in 1985, she did this drawing, the people of all races and times encased in clear rectangular receptacles for preservation by the non-human beings she called the Watchers, who have monitored the earth for thousands of years, which goes back to what Barry was saying. I'm just rushing through this so I can get the last bit out. The other thing I find is, the other similarity is people who report close encounters often have a robust pattern, shall we say, in their experiences, which is very akin to shamanic initiation experiences, if you've ever looked into those, where, for example, people who become shamans are called by the spirits, or dragged off by the spirits more likely, taken away to a place away from their tribe, dismembered symbolically, rebuilt symbolically, and those shamans might have sticks or precious stones, crystals, etc. inserted into their body symbolically. Then they return to their tribe, tell their story to the tribe, and then they continue to live with the tribe, but on the outskirts of it. They never fully reintegrate into that tribe. And when I read that, and there's a gentleman, some of you will know, Simon Harvey Wilson, who's no longer with us. I think he died about age 51, many years ago. He was a Perth UFO researcher, but he did his master's thesis on the comparisons between people who report close encounters and shamanic initiation experiences. And when I read that, I thought, yes, this is exactly what I'm finding too. We know in some shamanic art that objects like UFOs actually show up. And this is some of the artwork done by Pablo Cesar Amaringo, over here too, who, while taking ayahuasca, was seeing these things and painting what he was seeing. He's also not with us now, and here's some more. So we have these things that look disc-like, emitting light, that he's got in his artwork there, and also here. But again, I don't have the time to talk about this fully, but I will be talking about it at the Close Encounters Conference in January 2017 at Byron Bay. Close Encounters and a Pathway to Shamanic Initiation. How much time have I got?
You have got half an hour.
Oh, I've got half an hour. Okay, great. Right, so I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you about this experience because it has everything in it. It involved a woman who I know quite well, actually. We met many years ago. She was involved in running the, I won't say that, but she was, I met her on the Gold Coast, and her experience, this particular experience was in 1988. And she and her husband, living on the Gold Coast, decided to go on a holiday up to Cairns, a driving holiday. They got as far as Sapphire. The car broke down out in the middle of nowhere. So while it's 5:30 in the afternoon, I think she said, it's going to get dark soon, what are we going to do? So the husband's fiddling under the car, looking like he knows what he's doing, and she just goes for a walk, a wander over the crest of the hill, and she sees, out in the middle of nowhere, Sapphire Caravan Park. Yay, we've got somewhere to stay for the night. So they go there, they stay in the caravan park, except she decides she wants to stay, for some reason, in one of these tents that are already set up for you. So that night they're lying in the tent, the flap is open, she's looking out at the stars, just enjoying the evening, and she sees this. She sees a bright light in the sky, and then out of it comes these double boomerang crossed shaped objects. And before she could think, what on earth is that? She's in a different place. And where she is she's under a street light in a scene. And she doesn't know where she is, but she's somewhere. She's standing there thinking, well, what's this about? The next thing she knows, this shows up. There are 4 beings in this object, one of them holding a child. And it pulls up and she feels a familiarity with them. And the one holding the child stands up and they're communicating telepathically, and they're saying, this is your unborn son. You're going to have this child. And she wanted to hold it, and before she could hold it, they wanted to spray her down. And this is what they looked like. This is her depiction by an artist we had at the time. And it was a very good likeness of what she saw. And one of these beings had a backpack on, and they sprayed her all down, made her all wet before she could hold this child. But then as quickly as she got wet, she's dried off. So, and the beings looked like this, very human looking, and wearing these long one-piece suits that cover all of them. And they give her the child. They want her to take the child because this is her unborn son, and she's loves the experience, but she wants to give the child back because she knows somehow that something inside of her is not working and it's not right for her to have this child at the time. After much toing and froing between them, she is saying, she's saying, no, I can't take this child. I can't take this child right now. And so they take the child back, and she's saying, take me with you. I don't want to be here. This is not my planet. I don't want to be here. Take me with you. Starting to feel that they are much more her family than any family she's had on planet Earth. Eventually they part. And next thing she knows, she's waking up in the tent. I think she said it was morning. Her husband says something to her about a stampede of, did you hear that? Stampede of wild horses during the camp during the night. She said that was no stampede of wild horses. And she thought to herself, well, if I've seen a UFO, if there are UFOs and ETs, I've just had that experience. But turns out after that, she had not told her husband that she had just found out she was pregnant before they left. After that, she has a miscarriage on the way to Cairns. She starts bleeding. They get to the hospital. She says, I think I'm having a miscarriage. She'd not told the husband, like I said, and they said, okay, come in, we'll examine you. And then after the examination, they said, there is no indication that you've ever been pregnant. Nothing at all. So she doesn't know what that was. She said there was no fetus, nothing that she could recognise. She couldn't make any sense of it whatsoever. So it was a really interesting case that she has never changed in all the time that I've known her. Really interesting story. Other things had gone on too. She had missing time, turned up at places 5 kilometres down the road, like a blank of time, where she was just a second before was driving in a recognised location. What does it mean? I don't know. Again, it's one of the many mysteries and long growing list of high strangeness and in complex intricacies of things around the UFO phenomenon that we do not understand. Just wanted to go through this quickly about some of the indicators and themes that show up in the lives of people who report close encounters. They'll often have close or significant sightings where, when they're talking to me, they will give me really detailed descriptions of what they're seeing, or somehow that sighting has some significance in their life, but they don't really know why, but it's very, very important. They'll often have multiple sightings through their life, and Barry's one of those types of people who had many, many sightings during his life. Family history of sightings, they'll report missing time, emergence of psi abilities or a history of it in their family, precognition, ESP, psychic phenomena, all those sorts of things. Difficult childhoods, like I said. They could sometimes report sensitivity to light, sound, emotions of others, sensitivity to environmental toxins, develop a deep ecological concern about what's going on the planet, become socially conscious, spiritually engaged. I've had people sitting in my home crying because some species have just been wiped out, or there's a concern about the trees that are being chopped down in the Brazilian rainforest. We all have those experiences, but this is to the point where they can almost not function because that's going on, because they have a deep connection to the environment and to the planet, which shamans do, by the way. They become creative and artistic, and this is so predictable that about 95% of all cases ever reported to me, they will have a background in music, be musicians, performers, painters, sculptors, writers, anything that to do with creativity, develop an interest in healing, whether it's traditional or alternative, but usually alternative healing or complementary therapies, become more concerned about what they're putting into their bodies, try and live a healthier life and help other people while they do it. So that's what is repetitive, comes up all the time. Just have a little bit of And I think you might agree with some of those, Mariana, yeah. Now, what has amused me over the years is that people have said to me, if aliens came down here, I'd get on board this ship. I'd blow this planet, I'd get away from here. And this is why I would say, why you don't want to have a close encounter. Because I find that people who have, and I'm just going to talk about 3 people I've got in mind at the moment, who I think are very genuine, deeply disturbed initially, but have learned to live with their experiences and have had to cope with it while trying to live a normal life and raise a family. That they often find it difficult to function in society, to accept what society tells them is real, all those sorts of things. We all do too, but they have a really difficult time. They have relationship breakdowns, they can contemplate suicide, they can develop self-destructive behaviours like addictions, smoking, drinking, drugs, sex, food, whatever. And they're quite strong addictions. They'll question their life. Why the hell am I here? To the point where they become dysfunctional. They can lose grip with reality. They don't know what's real anymore. They can become quite ungrounded. They can suffer trauma. They can have a deep sense of isolation and just not feel part of the greater human tribe, as I'm sure some of us do to a degree, but they seem to suffer immensely because of it. They're forever changed to the core, have a sensitivity to others' emotions and their energies. So some people cannot go out in public. One woman was told me that she actually moved to a remote area on a peninsula in South Australia because she couldn't be around high tension power lines. Another person said that they go and live out in the middle of, God knows, some godforsaken place out in central Australia because they can't be around people. So it's a really difficult thing to cope with. They can receive psychic messages about others and they don't want to know about other people, like what's going on, but they can't stop it. They'll have a heightened compassion, which sounds like a good thing, and it is, but to the point where it actually creates a dysfunction for them. Like I said before, people crying, breaking down crying because of things that are going on. They become more heart-centered, that's what happens to them. And that's a good thing, but we don't want to not be able to cope with what's going on the planet if we're going to hope to change it. We have to be able to deal with it. Difficult to accept being human in a physical form. See and communicate with dead people. They don't always want to know that or do that. And Barry and I investigated a sighting last year or early this year, I can't quite remember now. But the woman was in a car with a friend with her 2 young daughters, and there was an object that followed them for about 10 to 12 kilometres, and it came down in a bushland block in the middle of suburbia. They pulled up, she saw the light through the scrub, saw it sort of dim down, and we're hearing that description, and Barry thought, well, it's possibly a hoax device. So he's off in the bush bashing, trying to find the remnants of that, never found a thing. She told us that she'd seen lights further down the road, and so he went down there and slogged through the bush, didn't find anything. But while he's doing that, she tells me that when she was a child, she woke up one particular occasion and saw these big yellow eyes at the end of the bed. Told her father about it. He said, it's okay, you're all right. He was aware. He'd been having close encounters his whole life. And then he died. Then she started seeing him, and she said, frightened the heck out of her. And one day she walked into the house and he was sitting on the lounge, as solid as you and I are. And she walks in and goes, oh my God, Dad, don't do that. If you want to communicate with me or appear to me, do it in my dreams, please, because I can't handle the fact that you're dead, but I see you, okay? So that's what she did, and now they communicate in the dreams. And so people don't want to see dead people. It's very, very disturbing, but it happens. And mediums have to deal with that too. They know things before they're going to happen, so they become precognitive, change their diet and lifestyle, which is okay for them, but not so good for their partner. If anyone here has ever been a meat eater and changed to being a vegetarian and your partner hasn't, that's a difficult situation. find conversations irrelevant. I couldn't be bothered talking to people. Human beings? Are you kidding? We knew there was one fellow who came to a Close Encounter support group that I ran last year, and he had a memory of a pre-birth existence, and he said in that particular experience that he was telling the beings, who by the way happened to be hooded, robed beings, which often shows up too, that there's no way in the world I'm going down there to planet Earth. I don't even like them. I am not going. But he was aware of somehow of his existence before he was incarnated. And they have a sense of mission but don't know what it is in the beginning often. They struggle with their life purpose, and they certainly do disconnect from humanity. They do not call human tribe or the humans their tribe. They call extraterrestrials their tribe, and they want to go home. And they've had their bags packed for a very long time. Please come and pick me up, because I've had enough of this place. So I'm sure some of you can relate to that. So I'm just going to wind up here. Some of the things that I see happening here in these stories are deaths of personal egos through their experiences. They're having dark nights of the soul experiences, which are prolonged duress, while they're coming to terms with what's going on in their life, while they're being stripped down from their previous identity, while they rebuild a new identity post-experiences. And there's often grief involved in that because they didn't mind their life, who they were before, but they know they can never go back to that. They've outgrown that shell. They've got to shed that skin like a snake and go on and be a new version of themselves. And they can have transcendental visionary experiences, just like I was talking about that lady there. Whether it was a vision or a real experience, she can't say, but that was her experience. She thought it was a physical experience, but she can't say. She said, I can't say that for certain. They have exceptional human experiences, which is another way of looking at it, which was a term, EHEs, was coined by Dr. Rhea White, who's no longer with them. Talking about a lot of dead people today. They're all gone. But an exceptional human experience is where something happens to you and it is transformative. It awakens you and transforms you. So you're like that, I've lost it. The butterfly, anyway, that comes out of the cocoon. I was trying to think of the word in between. Metamorphosis, in a metamorphosis. And they're having what I call shamanic-like initiation experiences. It's all a big mystery. So like I said at the beginning, when you start to look at the UFO subject, and I'm sure a lot of you have, that the deeper you look into it, the more mysterious it becomes. So there are many more questions to ask. It is a journey of mystery, and there are extraordinary encounters that people have. And I just wanted to put this in here too. On the Gold Coast in August, there is the Paradigm Shift Summit. And at that, I will be talking about extraordinary encounters, UFOs and ETs in Australia, going into some of this in more detail. But you can actually get a discount if you go there to the website and put in my Christian name, Sheryl. You'll get a discount if you want to attend that event. So that's it from me. Any questions I would love, or comments, I would love to hear from you if I haven't put you to sleep. Yes?
Have you got a book about all this?
Not yet, I'm working on it. I will. Someone said that to me in Melbourne at a conference last year. When you write that book, will you let me know? Yes, sir.
A lot of this information, if you study Conversations with God by
Yes.
Neil Walsh, not all of it, but there's a lot of knowledge in there.
There is. Yeah, I've got those books. Yes?
You know that, like the symbols and the language and the writings and all that, and also the word you're speaking, isn't that quite similar to light language?
What people refer to as
Yes, light
that.
language, and it's not just speaking, it's also like through dancing, through, you know.
True, they
That's
write
really-
it.
Yes, you
and-
can be a writer as I write, but yeah, it is.
What is that?
Yeah, it is classed as, it's just something that just comes through you. It's
Exactly.
It's your energy, you know what I mean? And it can be either given to you from, like, won't get into it, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that what
Yep.
you're talking about is like classed.
I can't tell you it is. I can't confirm that. I can only tell you what I've told you.
What you think, yeah.
To go beyond that is to interpret it, which I really can't do. I'm just trying to give you the information. Anything else? I just wanted to quickly ask too, does anyone here do yoga? A couple of people. Okay, so you'd be aware of asanas? Yeah, the different positions that you can do. And sometimes that happens spontaneously, the different yoga positions. And I have had that experience, because I've had a close encounter too, and it became on spontaneously. And it's like, and if you go onto YouTube and put in spontaneous asanas, A-S-A-N-A-S, you'll see someone there going into this spontaneous experience. Yoga teachers should be aware of it. But what is it? I really don't know. Are we expressing memories? Because I actually went into a yoga position, and I've never done yoga in my life. This is some years ago. And I could not reproduce that position in my ordinary consciousness. But it happened in a workshop. And I don't know what that means. But I'd like to know. Anybody else? Oh,
Sheryl?
yeah?
There's this UFO researcher in the States that in his research over 25 years or so, that the real ETs do not abduct humans and they do no harm, that it's an industrial complex military that has already the technique 60 years already. It's underground. Pine Gap is one of those deep underground where UFOs are being made. And they have these man-made humanoids that they do the abduction, they do the implanting of things, and they follow you and family. And they put in your head the memories they want you to have. So, do you I feel that he's correct in, he's got documentations of people from the CIA, astronauts, you name it, all these people that were made to keep the silence. And the reason is, you've heard this one world government, that their intention through movies, great science fiction movies, of aliens coming and killing us, is to build up the fear of the human race, so that when they do meet, you know, the real UFOs, not the man-made, the real, that they will gather the armies around because they have the technology that ET has. Mm-hmm. And they will go to war, like the Hollywood stuff, and you know, destroy ETs or civilizations from other worlds, so that this one world government will rule us, will be in charge of us. And he's got tons of this documentation, disclosure. And presidents, prime ministers, you name it, they know this, and they can't come out with it because they're not allowed. They're not in this circle who controls. So ETs, he says, will not harm us. They do no harm, but they're this other man-made. They have been doing the harm way over 60 years. Way over 60 years. And you're saying that these people that you're quoting, wonderful things that they have said and experienced, and they have books, and they're not here anymore. They have passed. And these other witnesses from high profiles from around the world have come also to give witness. And they're not the ordinary housewife, husband. They're people who worked within the system, and they have disclosed this to their detriment. This fellow is getting a lot of death threats now because he's urging people to come forward to witness, not by, you know, by actual witnessing of what they've done. Most of them are technicians, you name it. So it's Hollywood now has this tremendous new movie that's coming. 20 years ago, they did the Independence Day. That, you know, they came to destroy the world, and then, you know, humans saved the world, shot the bad ETs, and now they have made another one. And there's more of this coming out. In the Independence Day resurgence, where we now have the technology to combat ETs, mano a mano. So it's the fear that humans are being injected with by the man-made stuff. And it's around the world. Everything that's underground is secret because they have the technology. And they're the ones that shut down the UFOs around Roswell. And they have the papers, they have the documents. So, what do you think of that?
Problem.
Pardon?
Problem. We could be manipulated to think anything by anybody. Extraterrestrials, from my experience of what witnesses have told me, and that's where I get my information from, generally only, is that extraterrestrials are generally master mental manipulators of human beings. Now, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. But I do think there are also human beings who've, you know, there's been a lot of psychic research done by the military on that subject too. We don't know enough. I just don't buy into any of it. I can only say I stick with the witness testimony, what they tell me. Again, those alien contacts, whatever they are, they can also be manipulating people to believe whatever they want. I try not to go there because you can spend a lot of time thinking about that stuff but not actually getting anywhere, for me, you know.
Because they do go under hypnosis.
Yep.
And they will remember that they saw an ET, the Greys, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's all right. It's
Yeah.
true, but it's man-made.
Yeah, yep, I hear what you're saying and I've read that stuff. Yeah. I can't confirm it though. Yes, sir.
The cosmos.
Yes. Sounds like a small question.
And what involves in it.
How long we got? Sorry.
There's only two polarities. There's low evolving, high evolving. Most of this species is a low evolved species. We have to achieve a level in the cosmos, throughout the cosmos, of what you call oneness and unity. But we're not out of nursery school.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, sure. Like I said, yeah. Yes, Dave.
I'm just going to say one thing that supports your whole weirdness thing, you know, in regards to the UFO. Something I read about years ago, I don't know who put it forward, but there was somebody put it forward called the hilltop theory, which was the stranger, the higher the strangeness of a you know, UFO phenomenon in particular, the less likely it is that person's going to talk about it. So, although we do, when you think about the UFO thing, as you said, you know, going right back to 88, and you think, oh, it's all, you know, star-like things wobbling about in the sky, and occasionally you see something close up. But I think that, you know, I think that hilltop, from my years of investigation too, it's a lot easier to say to someone, oh, I saw this star thing in the sky last night and it did all this, rather than saying to somebody, I got abducted by aliens last night, I got taken aboard a ship, the whole thing. So, to say that it's mostly about lights in the sky is probably a distortion of the hilltop factor, and that there's a hell of a lot more weirdness going on that people are just not going to tell us about because, you know, for obvious reasons.
Yeah. And you would know that UFO researchers have, you know, we have not always given permission to speak publicly about cases because people don't want to come across it on their story on YouTube or read about it on the internet. So the only other people we can discuss it with are our own groups and other researchers because we just don't have that permission. But it's not that there's a great secret. I mean, you've heard, you can go and read lots of things on the internet too. But look, Doug, it's so strange, isn't it? It's so weird, and you've had years of experience in the UFO field too, and Wendy, you've all heard different experiences, and it just becomes more complex, much more complex. Yes.
I'd be interested in your experience, if you want to talk about it.
Sure, yeah. It was about 1990, I think, or 91, I can't remember. Early hours of the morning, I woke up, I was wide awake. I didn't know why. It wasn't my habit to wake up then. And between myself from about here is to the bed, that's the window, there were 3 small beings standing beside the bed. And I went, oh goodness. No, I actually froze. I was terror struck. And I froze and I could see them. They were what people described as the typical small grey type shapes, but they were dark because the street light was outside and it was, and I still can't quite understand this, but there was it was creating shadow on the front of them, but I could somehow still see the shape of their eyes, which are the big black wraparound eyes. I was terror struck. I did what any normal person would do. I pulled the sheet up over my head, started saying the Lord's Prayer, which I hadn't said since Sunday school, and I don't know where that came from. The next thing I woke up, it was morning, had no memory of the experience till later that afternoon. And something got triggered in my mind and went, oh my God, that happened last night. And when I became aware of these beings, and I say this to people sometimes, is that the fear was akin to what I imagine if you wake up and you see a very large tiger perched, looking at you, and you know if you move, you're done for. So it was a sense of that. But also people who are terrified don't usually go to sleep. They don't go to sleep. So I don't know what happened. There was just a blank in that. One day I will explore it a bit more maybe. But I've been happy to sit on it this long, it can wait. And I do believe what Bud Hopkins says is that if you're having close encounters and your life is going along okay, don't muck around with hypnosis and dig into it. It's only if your life is not working, that's when you dig into it. He said, because you're going to open a can of worms, you can't close that door, and you probably won't want to do it. Like in later down the track, you'll think, why the hell did I do that? And I know Kelly Cahill did that with her experiences. Yes, sir.
Anyway, with these extraterrestrials, can they travel all over the universe or really long distances? And if they can, what gives them the power to travel all around the universe, whereas we can't?
Don't know and don't know. I've not been in spaceships that I remember where I've travelled all around the universe. I can't answer that question. I can tell you other people's stories where they've remembered being on board crafts. They don't always know where they are or where they've been taken to, although that Michel Demarque knew it was some planet he'd been taken to. So apart from that, I can't go past that. Yes?
Do you know very much about UFO activity at time gaps and whether things are still being seen?
I don't know a lot. I don't hear a lot about that now. I do know there was a case that Tim Good published in his book, Alien Base, Alien Liaison, where there was a report of someone who had seen UFO disappear into the mountain nearby, and no crash sound, nothing like that. I can't tell you. Was there anyone? Yes, sir.
In the volumes Conversations with God, it mentions, going back an hour and a half ago, you discussed about reincarnation. In those volumes, it mentions reincarnation is real because the species system or the people have not evolved to such a high level of maturity. That's why reincarnation is real.
Okay.
That's what it says in the volume.
Yeah. Just to address that a little bit, some people, and we were having a discussion about this, and I'll be quick because I think we've got to stop now, don't we, is that some people believe, like people who follow Sixto Paz's work, that you have to be highly evolved to have alien contact. I can tell you, you do not. The people I have spoken to, I wouldn't say they're highly evolved people. They're just ordinary people like us having, and I'm not saying you're not evolved, I'm not saying that, but they're just ordinary human beings having extraordinary encounters. You do not have to stop eating meat and stop drinking alcohol and stop having sex and blah, blah, blah to be able to see UFOs and interact with extraterrestrials. That's not the background of the people that I I have spoken to. That's all I can say on that. I think that's it, Mariana, is it? Yes.